Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 425 of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. We're here today with Claudia Arias, who is the founder of Sacred Space Counseling. She is a Lyme literate therapist who focuses in EMDR and has had her own Lyme journey, which has led her to be an even better mental health professional to serve our community. I'm here today with Caitlin, who is a good friend of Tick Bootcamp and will be co-hosting this episode with Claudia, who's also studying mental health as well. So it's going to be a really fun podcast. And I want to thank you, Claudia, for coming on the podcast to share your story.
Thank you, Matt. And nice to meet you, Caitlin.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Caitlin, we are so pleased to have you back. And Claudia, I really want to jump in because not only do I want to learn about you and your story, but I want to learn about what you do to help the community and advice and tips and tricks you can give the community to help these people who are just struggling so much with physical and emotional issues because of chronic Lyme disease. So let's first, Claudia, talk about, how old are you? Where do you live? And what's life like now for you?
So I am 53 years old and I live in California in the San Joaquin Valley. Very hot here in a very, very small little town called Porterville.
So now let's go all the way back to life as a kid. Did you grow up in California?
I did. I'm originally from Mexico, but when I was 1 year old, we moved to California.
All right. So what was that like? 'Cause I'm an East Coast guy, right? I've been born and raised in Long Island, New York, and California is a place that Caitlin is very well familiar with as well, being a California native. But describe what growing up in California is like to our listeners, because we have people listening all around the world, from Canada to Mexico to Europe to France to China to New York, where I'm from.
Well, for me, my parents were immigrants, so it was a lot of like moving around. Um, we were in like the San Diego area when we first arrived, and I just remember running around hills, mountains, being really just like carefree, having pets, running around with the pets. And then we moved to the Central Valley and same thing, just really carefree. We always lived out in the country, so we could run around and just play around in the fields, and it was fun. It was great.
But did you remember ever being bitten by a tick or learning about ticks as a child?
No, no, I never remember being bit. I don't recall, ever having like a rash or anything. And I didn't hear about ticks till I was older. Then I started to hear like I did a lot of hiking and I would see little signs. I would say be careful with ticks or be aware of ticks. But that was it. I didn't know what that meant.
And these tick signs were in California? Is that
Yes.
okay?
Mhm.
That's good to hear that there were tick signs, because I didn't even know that. So that's a positive, right?
Yes.
So now let's fast forward a little bit more. So you're growing up in California. It's a beautiful place, very carefree childhood, what sounds like a very pleasant experience. Now, when you're getting out of high school, are you going into college? What's life like after high school for you?
It was it was busy for me. I was going to school, trying to figure out, what I wanted to do. I was going to our community college. I had a lot of friends. I was into hanging out with them and going out and socializing. I life was really good.
Any illness, any signs or clues that maybe you weren't as quote unquote healthy as your peers at the time?
The only thing I remember is that I always felt like I was ADHD, like I had a hard time focusing. So I just used to say like, "Oh, I'm ADHD," and I just noticed that I had a hard time like remembering things and focusing.
But I'm sure that didn't raise any red flags, because a lot of other kids probably had similar symptoms and you just thought you were, that was you, right? That's who you were.
Right. I could easily justify, English was not my first language, so I always thought like, oh, I'm just struggling with the language. So I could always justify any symptoms I had.
So what did you go to school for, and did you graduate, and what happened at this point in your life as you transitioned into your professional career?
I got my bachelor's in counseling, not in psychology. And I started working as a social worker. I wasn't really happy with what I was doing, so I went back to get my master's in counseling psychology. And I wanted to be a therapist.
So I'm always fascinated with when you were going to school to get your bachelor's in psychology and then you went back to get your master's. I think a big part of the mental health education should be tick-borne illnesses because we know Lyme disease can create a lot of mental health symptoms, anxiety, depression, potential suicidal ideations. Now, was that part of your curriculum at all in your undergrad or graduate studies?
No, not at all. Never did I hear anything about Lyme or any medical conditions, not mold, nothing like that did I ever hear.
So putting aside Lyme disease, right? There's a debate out there now whether or not there's some sort of physiological root cause, meaning bacteria, virus, protozoa, you name it, that's triggering or contributing at a minimum to mental health conditions. So is this something that you learned in school as a potential possibility that some sort of foreign substance, again, bacteria, parasite, protozoa, et cetera, could be contributing or causing mental health conditions?
Not at all. Not at all.
Well, I'm sad to hear that, but I am happy that we have a lot of specialists like yourself now who know better, frankly, right? And we'll get into that later on. So you go to school, and I'm just curious, what did you learn in school? Was this sort of, hey, people need to be able to talk it out to get better, or we should try to put everybody on some sort of prescription medication to address their psychological conditions? Like, what was the general idea of your education at the time?
I went to a really good school. I went to a school in Santa Barbara called Pacifica Graduate Institute, very depth oriented. We learned about the soul, about dream tending. Um, so I think that was really helpful for me. It gave me a different lens, a different perspective. So it was like a whole body healing. So we did talk about like, just different aspects of the person. However, we still did not talk about parasites or Lyme or Bartonella or anything like that. Um, but I still feel like that going to that school was still really helpful for my journey because it helped me to look at a different perspective.
So I'm curious, did they teach you anything about the nervous system? Because nervous system dysregulation can contribute to a lot of psychological conditions as well. And, fight or flight, overdrive, and potential root causes to nervous system dysregulation in school.
Yes, we did learn about the nervous system. We learned a lot about like somatic types of therapies to regulate the nervous system. So yes, we did.
Claudia, can you describe what somatic methods are for our listeners, please?
Yes, so it's body movement. So instead of just sitting and talking, you're actually moving your symptoms through the body.
Is that what you would call EMDR, which is, what is it? I forget what it even stands for. You're putting me in the spot here, and I'm with a professional. I should know better, Claudia. I'm sorry. I don't remember from my research.
No, so EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. There can be. I add, movement when I'm doing EMDR, but it isn't that. Those are two different types of modalities. But yes, in EMDR, when I'm working with somebody with chronic illness, with Lyme, we're going to do some somatic work.
So it's a lot of different techniques you can blend together to optimize the effectiveness of these therapies, basically.
Yes, yes. And they each have their own protocol, but yes, you can be flexible with it and add other modalities with it to make it more effective for your clients.
So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if you can describe a somatic practice that's a common one that you use in your clients, or maybe that's out there on YouTube that can help somebody listening to this podcast that's dealing with chronic illness, and even walk us through it, a very simple one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the one I like to use a lot when people are feeling something in their body, they call me and they're like, I can't, I can't get rid of this feeling. I will help have them push a wall. So they are just leaning against the wall, like they want to move the wall. Even their feet are placed as if you're going to actually push the wall, and then they are pressing against the wall, and they can feel that, whatever symptoms are in their body push through.
So actually a real wall. So stand against a
Yes.
real solid
Mhm.
wall,
Mm-hmm.
plant your feet, get your hands up, lean into
Yes.
the wall and push it and
Push it. Yes.
push it hard. And then you can feel your symptoms sort of drain out, basically,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
How
Mm-hmm.
long? How long should they do that for? How long should they push?
Just till they feel it move through their body.
And that's a very common somatic technique, right?
Yes. Yes.
I love it. I love these tips already, Claudia. So anyway, let's get back to your story because we'll get into more of that later on in this podcast. So, okay, so you're in school, you graduate. Obviously, you're very smart, and at a young age, you're becoming very successful. What do you start to do for work?
So, um, when I was I was doing social work as soon as I finished my degree in psychology. And then I started to do some early intervention work where I was working with kids 0 to 3 who had physical disabilities. And that was more developmental work. And I was working on my master's program at the time. And then I graduated, and then I started working at the clinic where I work at now with children who have mental um, problems. We focus in sexual abuse.
So now, I'm guessing you're in your 20s around this time. Tell us about your personal life. Is this around the time? Obviously, I think you said you have some children. Were you finding your significant other at this point? What was life like personally outside of your professional world?
Yes, so I was already with my spouse during this time, and I have a son and I have a daughter, and I had them both while I was going to school.
So, if you don't mind sharing, what's your husband's name and your children's names?
So my husband is Juan Rodriguez, and then I have my son Justice, and then my daughter Cambria.
I love the name Justice. I don't know why I've always loved that name. So I just wanted to share that. Okay, great. So you met Juan in your 20s, and this is now your husband today, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Mhm.
And so now you're this is a pretty good period of your life, and still no health issues, right?
Still no health issues. Not that I mean, now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, there was some signs, but back then I didn't think there was anything wrong.
Claudia, tell us about the signs. What were they looking back?
Yeah, looking back, I think I had a lot of, just like my mood was unstable. Like I always struggled with depression and anxiety, but it wasn't significant enough for anybody probably to notice or for me to, um, think there was anything like really serious. Like I would see a therapist, and I did a lot of healing stuff. Like I would go to a lot of retreats. I would, of course, I had my therapist, and I felt better, but I never felt like 100% better. Other things that I noticed were sometimes I would struggle with memory, like recalling things. And I just figured that it just took me a little bit longer to learn stuff too.
I wonder if you were suffering at this time from Lyme disease and you had a healthy lifestyle. As a mental health professional, you were implementing techniques to
Mhm.
balance your nervous system. I know from your pre-interview questionnaire that you were working out pretty extensively. And all of these things are helping bolster your immune system and push
Yeah.
back against all these pathogens in your body.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking that you had, Lyme and co-infections probably for several decades before getting diagnosed in your 40s, because that's what I'm sensing from your story here. But you were such a healthy person with a healthy lifestyle, not just from exercise, but from your mindfulness and your studies as a mental health professional, that you were just pushing back and fighting and fighting and fighting until you couldn't anymore, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember like I was doing like 4 retreats a year. That retreats is my thing, that I do just to recover from work. So I would go like to 4 retreats a year that were like, 4 days long. And I was working out. I had a personal trainer um, I have really healthy friends. And it, you would think I would be like super healthy.
So let me ask you, I'm going to pause and ask you a specific question, because being somebody who was very active and fit and then got sick, and now and I'm going to give away the secret, you are better than you were before, which I love. You are 105% recovered, which is amazing. I see this in myself, that I was an active, I really worked out a lot as well too before I got sick. And I think I may have over-exercised because I wanted to exercise and I wanted to get those endorphins, and I felt like I needed to. And it was probably a stress relief technique. It was probably an avoidance technique for some of my stress, my nervous system dysregulation. So I feel like there's a balance that maybe I used it as a crutch. And although it was helping my immune system, maybe not if I overexercised. Looking back now as a mental health professional and having the experience of Lyme and chronic illness under your belt, what do you think a good exercise regimen is for somebody? Because obviously, if you're really sick, we don't recommend going out and running or doing something that's over exertion, because you can have a setback. But if people are listening and they're feeling well enough to exercise, where should they start, and what's a healthy balance in exercise to not overdo it?
I think if you have a medical condition, I think you need to listen to your body and do, whatever it is that you can. I've seen some people who will even, do exercises laying down for their movement, but just doing what feels good and not what's going to drain you or make you worse, I think is really, really important.
I
Let me
agree
ask
with
you.
that.
Oh, sorry, Caitlin.
When I was bedridden, I would at least like try to stretch in bed or like do like laying down exercises, because just to get your body moving. But definitely there are some people that are so ill they can't work out. So just any type of movement at all, I think, is beneficial, like you said, but definitely to listen to your body.
Right. I think that's key, is listening to your body, regardless of what anybody else is telling you.
Let me push you a little bit on that one, because I'm going to use my personal experience, right? I think this is an impossible question, but I'm curious to see your thoughts or response to my comment, which is, I feel like we have to push ourselves a little bit, right? So we can't just say, I'm going to walk 10 houses and I got my exercise in. I think we have to push ourselves, which may mean we feel a little sore because we haven't used our muscles in quite a while.
Right.
I mean, I didn't move much at all for many years. When I first started trying to walk, I mean, I had to really do little by little by little, and I was sore because my muscles were so atrophied. And now that I'm able to run again, there are times when I start running and I'm like, for the first 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. And after 5 minutes, I'm like, I love this. And I can go for like 45 minutes straight, right? So how do we balance my body's telling me I don't want to run right now, until 5 minutes later, I feel like I'm loving it, versus I feel a little sore. Should I do it again tomorrow? Do I not? Like, sometimes we question our own body. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think for me, I like to listen to my body, and going through this journey has really connected me to my body. So I know when, I have pain after working out. I know if that's a good pain, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm sore, or if it's like, whoa, I triggered something else, because it will just feel like not a normal sore. And then I will be like, okay, I need to, cut back on this. So again, I just think listening to your body and getting to know your body really, really well.
I love that explanation, because that's exactly how I feel. You know what normal sore is versus, oh, this might be a setback. I better chill out, right? You're the more you're in tune to your body, the more you can decipher what, okay, this is sore, but it's okay, versus this is not just normal soreness, and this is something I better respond to, right? So I love that. So let's go back. I'm going to keep pulling us down these roads here, but let's go back to your journey. So now you're working, you meet Juan, you haven't had your 2 kids yet, Justice and Cambria. Walk us through now, what's going on next? Your late 20s, your 30s, what life is like, what's going on, good and bad in your life, and if any health issues arise, over the next decade.
So no, I didn't notice anything during that time. The only thing I noticed again is that I would be like easily dysregulated. And again, like my emotions were just not stable. I would get on like an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication, and they wouldn't work. but it was mild. It wasn't like, I don't think anybody even noticed. I think it was just me noticing. Um, like again, I knew there was something wrong, but I just thought, okay, this is who I am. Like, I just struggle with depression and anxiety.
So I think that's a really interesting distinguishment there, because most people that come on this podcast say, when I'm suffering from Lyme disease and I go on mental health medication, it did not help. That, and look, there are some exceptions to that, right? But I think the majority of our guests have said, if I go on antidepressant medication or I go on anti-anxiety medication, it didn't help at all, or it really didn't help much in the way my doctor expected it to. And that is a sign, I think, that maybe there's something deeper. And look, I believe there's always something deeper, but we'll get into that later. We're going to hold that conversation, that debate for later. So, and I guess on that note, were you being open about your issues? Because you obviously went to a doctor or maybe a psychiatrist to get this antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication. Were you being vocal to friends and family about what was going on? Or was it something you kind of kept to yourself and were a little ashamed of at the time?
I didn't tell anybody. My therapist and then my doctor. But
Yeah.
I don't think I was ashamed of it. It was mild. Like it wasn't significant enough for me like to stop working or anything. So I didn't really see it as something I needed to like reach out to people for help.
So it's mild where you recognize I have some depression, some anxiety.
Yeah,
Let me go to a doctor. Let me try some meds. It didn't work. It must just be me. I might be high strung. It's just how I am, right? Basically.
right.
Caitlin, you raised your hand before. Were you one of those who benefited from medicine, or were you one of those who did not benefit?
I did benefit from medicine. I had Lyme disease when I was young, from like 8 to 12, and then I took doxycycline. I got better, and then the mental health issues started creeping in for me. I started having depression in high school, and then in college. Well, I was having my heart racing, which I now know is POTS, but they also gave me an antidepressant. They put me on Prozac, and it did help with my anxiety. And then later, when I relapsed, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was put on an antipsychotic, and it did pull me out of the psychosis. So for me, the meds did benefit, but I do believe the ultimate root cause is Lyme disease.
Yeah. And I think what I'm curious there's a term somebody used. So I'm thank you, Caitlin, for sharing that. Although the majority or the more people on this podcast than not have said it didn't help much, there's obviously a subset like yourself, Caitlin, where it does help, right? And I don't want to lose sight of that. But either way, I feel that I forget who the guest was. We had somebody on almost 3 years ago now who talked to us about a term called a bridge, right? That maybe some of these psychological medications or just drugs in general, right? Anti-inflammatories or things that help us get through the pain and the suffering and the symptoms until we get a better diagnosis are bridges. They're just temporary, we call them Band-Aids. We hear a lot in the community, but these bridges are bridges to help us get to the next step without having to suffer too much until we can get deeper into the root cause to address it, right? And I think that's an important term, to not say, well, mental health medication isn't good for Lyme. That's not true, right? So, Claudia, what are your thoughts on that? With your patients, do you recommend that they try some psychological medication, or is it really a mixed bag of some benefits, some don't, and it's a case-by-case basis for your patients?
So first of all, I always have my clients listen to their doctor. So whatever their doctor is saying, I'm going to support that. And I love to work as a team. So I always want to be in contact with their Lyme literate doctor. And I think there's times when the client wants to be on medication. I of course will support them in that. I'm not going to be one to say like don't take medication. And if their doctor is okay with it, that is fine. I have noticed that with some of my clients, it just maybe takes off a little bit of the edge, but eventually it's not working at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's come back to your story again. I know I keep doing this, but we keep having a little side pass, which are really helpful. So now you're in your, I'll say your 30s. You thought you had some anxiety and depression. The medicine's not helping much. It's just me. Now, at this point, I'm guessing Justice and Cambria are now part of the picture in your 30s?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm losing track of my
okay.
We'll timeline.
We'll ballpark it, right? Because I have a very specific question here because
Okay.
very various people we've had on this podcast, and this is really mixed. It's been 50-50 from our experience out of almost 500 people we've interviewed and thousands we talked to in the community. when pregnancy comes into play with undiagnosed Lyme, and the person is sort of fighting it on their own with their immune system and their lifestyle, that some people say that their pregnancy helped them be superwoman, right? Like, oh my goodness, I felt the best I ever felt in my life before, and of course, then I crashed because of the Lyme afterwards. And some people say, oh, it was the worst pregnancy ever. Oh my goodness. So what was your experience, right? You're in your, whatever it is, your 30s ballpark. You have Justice, you have Cambria. What was that pregnancy experience like for you? And, looking back, do you see any signs of potential implications from Lyme at the time?
I remember feeling like really sick when I was pregnant, and like just I was nauseated all the time and chronically tired. I didn't have good pregnancies. Nothing bad happened. I just remember feeling so exhausted all the time. So that was not true for me that, I felt better.
And part of your routine blood work and everything you do during pregnancy, nothing came up abnormal, right? So I'm sure you went to doctors, you had tests, right? And everything was sort of run of the mill, normal, and nothing popped at that point as far as a potential red flag in your health.
Yeah, so once I started to get symptoms, yes, I did go to the doctor. My doctor kept on telling me, I would go and I'd be like, I feel so tired. And she would tell me like, you need to stop working. I'm gonna write you a note right now. But for some reason, I was like, no, I can't quit working. I don't know why. Because looking back at it, I don't know why I reacted that way. I was just like, I can't stop working. Like some OCD symptoms started to come up, and I could not stop working. And, finally she did take me off work.
So how long were you out of work for at this point when you were during your pregnancy?
I'm sorry, that was after that was not during my pregnancy.
Oh,
During my
afterwards.
pregnancy, yeah,
Okay.
okay, okay. I'm back. Okay, back to the pregnancy. No, I, just went off work just to, after delivering my kids, and that was it.
Okay.
But I went back.
So now let's kind of go through the next, we'll kind of fast forward, give us the highlights, the next decade, right? We'll say mid 30s to mid 40s.
Mhm.
What happened there as as Justice and Cambria grew up? Now you and Juan are raising, two young kids, you're working, and you kind of touched on that. Your doctor's like, you got to stop working. You got to chill out. And you did. So walk us through all the highlights of the next decade there.
Okay, so that where my doctor told me to stop working, that's later on when I got sick. That's,
Oh, even later. That's even, okay,
that's
got it.
3 years
Yep,
ago.
got it.
No, everything was fine. Again, the same, like depression, some anxiety I was dealing with. It didn't stop me from doing anything. I was still going to work. I love learning, so I'm always learning something. That's when I was doing like my EMDR trainings and just wanting to be better at EMDR. I fell in love with it. I was doing a lot of hiking. Our whole family would go hiking. I'm into meditation. Um, we were just doing a lot of like traveling, just having a good time doing life.
Now, do you ever recall a tick bite? So now we're kind of, I'm going to say we're up to you're 45, right? And now today you're 53. So you're 45 years old in this timeline we're talking about here.
Mhm.
Can you think of any time you were bit by a tick, whether you were hiking, you left the state, anything you can remember?
No, no.
I'm not surprised because I don't remember at all either. And I had overwhelmingly positive Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, you name it, right? Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Ticks are very stealthy. And if we're not acutely aware and actively looking, we probably aren't going to find the tick bites, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, okay, so you're 45 years old. Your things are good. Any major life things you want to talk about? Any particular milestones in life? Anything you want to share before I move on to your illness when you were in your 40s?
No, like nothing stands out. Nothing stands out. Like, nothing significant happened. Um, we bought a house, just things like that, but they were good things. Obviously some stress, moving and all that, but nothing stressful.
So relatively normal, right?
Yeah.
Nothing out of the norm.
Mm.
All right, so let's talk about now. Let's fast forward to the time you were 49 and your symptoms really started to kick in. If you can describe that for us. And unfortunately, I think that was March of 2020, which was right when COVID hit. So now this is
Right.
a really scary time. The world shuts down and you get sick and you're like, what is going on? So just kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so I just remember that's when I started to feel really, really tired, like a tired that I cannot describe. I just remember sitting at work in the office and I could not move. I was so tired, like I would just think like, oh, could I just, maybe I could just stay the night here, just messing around. But I would be like, God, like I can't even gather my stuff to get in the car and drive home. And then everything shut down and we were doing um uh therapy sessions through video. So we were working from home, which was better. Um, However, I just started to get all these crazy symptoms like I had like depersonalization, derealization, where I just felt like I was not in my body. Like I felt like the world was not real. Like I was watching a movie and I was in the movie. Like I was just so disconnected from myself. But I would justify it because I would say, well, I'm on video all day long. I can see why this is happening.
You kind of said, hey, I'm on Zoom all day long. And because of that, I'm now getting this, I think what we call in the community depersonalization, right? Where you like,
Mhm.
you're just totally disconnecting. Can you describe for us, Claudia? Because for people that haven't had the experience, it's really hard to explain, at least for me, what that actually is, right? Depersonalization, disassociation. What did it look like for you? If you can try to describe it in the most descriptive way you can for our listeners.
Yeah, so with the depersonalization, it was just me really disconnected from myself. Like I felt like I was narrating my story. Like I was telling my story in my head. Like I could hear my thoughts in such a weird way. Like, it was just, it was very confusing. Like if I was outside my body and I could watch the whole thing. And with the derealization, it was just like, again, like I'm watching a movie and like I'm disconnected from the world is how it felt.
And when COVID hit, we all got disconnected from the world, which is how you
Yeah,
rationalized it, right? And because it was
absolutely.
unfortunately timing wise a really bad time.
Right. So I could justify everything.
So, what other physical symptoms were you experiencing at this time? Because I know from your questionnaire that you had some night sweats and some other things, right? I mean, arm pain, things like that as well.
I had the weirdest symptoms. I had like I would be walking and I felt like I tripped. I remember like I was working, I was seeing clients, and then it was like my lunchtime. So I decided to go outside and take a walk. And then I tripped. I almost fell. And I turned around to see what I tripped on, and there was nothing. Like it was literally just my pathway, like a cement pathway. And I was like, what did I trip on? There was nothing. And it was just so confusing. And then I had other moments like that where I would almost trip. And I was like, my body's not working correctly. Like my brain's not telling my legs to move. And then other things were these sharp shooting pains and ice picked, sensations. um, I remember one day I couldn't see at all. Like I could not see, I couldn't, and I was driving and I had to pull over because I could not see at all. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I going blind or, what's going on? Um, Other things I had were the night sweats, and then I started to get panic attacks, and those were so horrible. Like it took me so long to control them. It was just I had a lot of OCD symptoms. Like I could not stop thinking. I would get fixated on one thing. I don't know why. Just retirement came to me and I was just like so fixated on retirement. Like my dad actually had to come and like sit down with me and tell me like you can't survive because I don't I was thinking like if I'm sick, I can't work and I'm not going to have retirement. It was really irrational because I have a retirement. I have a couple of retirements. So it was just really irrational. And he even had to like tell me like, like literally he took me to a dealership, a car dealership, and was like telling me, see, you could even trade in your car and get something smaller if you wanted to, like, so that he was showing me that I could survive. And I was just like, it was really irrational, these thoughts I was having.
So now, at what point do you realize this is not normal and I can't rationalize it away? I mean, it seems like things are escalating pretty quickly. So, was it you or was it Juan or one of your kids who said, "Hey, Claudia, you got to go to a doctor. There's something not right here."
I was already going to my doctor, because I was so tired. I was telling her I was tired, and she kept on telling me like that it was stress. And then she started to say it was um fibromyalgia, because I was in there like at least once a week telling her like I have like this, like I had these bulges on my arms. They were really big, like something had popped or something. And she would just say, oh, it's fibromyalgia. But I started to notice that this was really serious when I started to get the panic attacks. They were just really, really extreme, and I couldn't regulate them. And even with all my skills, I could not regulate, anything. Not my nervous system, nothing, not my thoughts. And I even went to a really good therapist, like a therapist that is very well known, and I went to her, um, and nothing would work. I was still getting worse.
That was the
So,
first my relapse when I was in college was just debilitating panic attacks. My heart rate would go so fast. I was in college and I was running out of the classrooms and they said, you're just anxious. And I'm like, this is more than anxious. They're debilitating, the
Yeah.
Lyme panic attack.
yeah, so tell us then, at this point, what are you thinking is going on? Are you thinking that like it's just me? Because I mean, look, your entire life you've been helping people with mental health related problems, and now you're suffering from crippling mental health symptoms and you're not getting better. So what are you thinking in your head at this point?
I knew something was wrong. I was like, you know, um, this is not like a mental illness. There is something else wrong here, and I need to figure it out.
So what was your family thinking? What was Juan saying? Was he supporting you in that, or was he thinking maybe it's just so psychological? What was the dynamic here with your relationship with your husband?
I think he did his best to help me and support me, but it's hard to understand this illness. It is. So I would tell him, like, I feel really tired, like there's something wrong with me, like something's gonna happen, bad's gonna happen. And he would just tell me, well, you need to stop working so much. But at that point, it was taking me like a long time to do my job because I was so tired. So I was working long hours to keep up with the workload because it took me so long. I was so tired.
When did your doctor convince you to stop working? Was it around this time?
It was in June that she told me of that year.
Was this last year? What year was
No,
this?
2020.
Oh, 20. We're still back in 2020, right? Got it. Okay.
Yes, that's
Yep.
when she told me that I needed to stop working. And I said, give me 8 days to finish all my paperwork. I'm still like, those OCDs and, thoughts like, let me finish my work, and then I will come back for that note. And I did. And she took me off work, which was the best thing I did because I could really focus on my health.
And still no diagnosis yet, right?
No, no diagnosis yet. She's still with the fibromyalgia. I'm over here, doing my own research, looking up, stories on people who have these illnesses, and everything kept on coming up fibromyalgia. I'm getting worse. Even the word fibromyalgia would like trigger me and I would have a panic attack. And like I had to like not be online because if I looked up, if the word if fibromyalgia came up, I would just, uh, you know, have a panic attack. And it was really, really scary for me.
So
It-
where did IGenics come into play here? Because I know from your questionnaire that your PCP eventually did an IGenics test, which to me was so surprising because no primary care doctor does an IGenics test.
yeah. So my PCP, she she has some knowledge about Lyme disease. So I'm surprised that she didn't catch it earlier. But I told her, because then I found out about Lyme, and I was going into a lot of groups on social media that were fibromyalgia clients, and they were saying like sometimes it could be Lyme. And I posted on there and I said, these are my symptoms. I have no pain, but I have like a lot of mental health symptoms that don't make sense. And somebody said, that sounds like Lyme. So that's when I started to do that research. And I went to my doctor and she said, no, we need to test some other things before we test for Lyme. She goes, we haven't even ruled out like diabetes or anything like that. Um, so I was like, okay. And then she tested for me for diabetes. It came back negative, and I said I want to test for Lyme. And then she tested me, and one of the band 41 came back positive, and everything was negative, everything else. And she just said, hey, this is like a marker for Lyme. So I'm gonna refer you to a clinic up north, and then you can, go talk to them about your symptoms. And I said, okay. But before that, I had been referred to so many places. I had been referred to Stanford. They tested me for fibromyalgia. They tested me for everything. I saw a psychiatrist, a like a really intense evaluation, and everything was negative. They said, nope, you don't have any of those things. Um,
And none of your techniques that you've learned throughout your career were helping you with your mental health symptoms, right? So you were trying all these things, everything under the
yes,
sun, and nothing was helping.
nothing was helping me. Nothing that I knew was working for me. And things were getting really hard too, because that's at the time I was working out, and I was still going to go see my trainer, and I would tell him like, I don't know if I could work out. Like I'm really tired. Like, you don't understand. It's a tired that's like really heavy. And he would just be like, no, you need to push through it. People always get like this when they want to give up and they want to start working out. So I was just like, oh my gosh, like I eventually stopped going to him, but it was really hard to hear that.
So who was this Lyme literate specialist that your primary care referred you to, and what was the outcome of that visit?
I saw Dr. Sugden at Pacific Frontier Medical Clinic at the time. Um, and I went to her, and she told me that she said, you have some kind of infection. She said that. She said, I don't know if you have Lyme. I don't know what you have, and we're gonna do an IGeneX test. And she said, and you're gonna get better.
Another
So was the
IGeneX test. Oh, sorry, Caitlin.
test that your primary care doctor, was that just a Western blot?
No, both
Did
of
that?
them did an IGeneX test,
Okay.
but I think my primary care doctor only tested for Lyme, and then Dr. Sugden tested for co-infections too.
What was the result of that test? Was it similar with an indeterminate one band, or was it a positive outcome?
It was not a positive outcome, but she said you have Lyme, and it came back positive for Bartonella.
Got it. So what was the treatment regimens? Obviously, you had an infection. She knew you were sick, and she was confident she can get you better. So what did she start doing now after the test comes back? You have Bartonella. Lyme wasn't positive, but we know even IGeneX isn't perfect, and that you likely can have Lyme as well. What is the first round of treatment here?
So the first time I went and when I talked to her, the first thing she had me do was get off gluten, dairy, and any sugars. And it was really strict. She said anything that can turn into a sugar, pastas, rice, anything, I'm going to get you off of that. And I did. I was like, I'm going to do whatever you tell me. And I did. I followed it, completely how she told me. And the tiredness went away
Huh?
just with that. It was like a big difference. However, my mental health is still getting, worse at this time. OCD symptoms are worse. My family, because my husband works out of town, and my family was like taking turns coming over, staying with me, just so I could manage those thoughts.
Huh?
Um, so I went to go see Dr. Sugden. That's when she told me I had the Bartonella and the Lyme. And she started off with Zythromax.
Oh, Zithromax, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And then she did the doxycycline. And then she ended with rifampin.
Mhm.
Did these help?
Uh, I got worse. I mean, obviously I got worse. There was a lot of herxing. Um, it could be my fault. I did tell her, because she asked me, she goes, do you want to go slow or do you want to go heavy into your treatment? I said, I want to get rid of this right now. Like, I don't care what happens. I want to get rid of it. And I herxed a lot, and that was probably the worst part about having the illness. Um, and I did have a lot of support. I had like my family come over. They were really supportive. Um, but I did start to get better. I did.
How long were you on the antibiotics for? And at what point did the herxing subside and you start to feel better?
The herxing probably lasted months. Like, I want to say, I could be wrong, but I felt like it lasted maybe 3 to 4 months. And I was on the antibiotics probably like, let me see, I started them like around September. I want to say like for 8 months I was on them.
And was it Zithromax, Doxy, and Rifampin in sequence, like meaning one and then another, or was it a combination where you were doing them at the same time?
I was doing the Zythromax. That one I did by itself. That was just at the beginning. And then I did the other two together. The doxycycline or rifampin. I did those together. And then we did some herbs at the end.
What were your herxing symptoms? What did you feel when you felt worse?
That was, you know, I felt like I had a lot of joint pain. I felt like I had arthritis. And I had other symptoms. I don't know if it was a herxing or if it was, part of the illness itself, but I also felt like I was almost like plugged into a microwave. Like like I had a lot of like EMF stuff. Like I couldn't even be around an outlet or a car wash, anything with any kind of vibration. I could not be around. It was so weird. Like like it was just weird that I couldn't be around those things.
What did they do to you? So, like, how did you feel when you were around those things?
I felt like I was like plugged in like to a microwave. Like if I was a microwave, like I was vibrating.
Hmm.
I used to say, like, I would have my parents put their hand on the refrigerator and I would say, do you feel that? Like that hum, that vibration? They would say, yeah. And I said, that's what Lyme feels like to me. My body feels like that at all times.
Hmm.
And it would
Yeah.
be worse when I would herx.
Yeah, and I could not sleep. I was like on 2 hours of sleep at the max because I could not sleep. I was up and that humming kept me up because I could not calm that down.
What kind of herbs did you do at the end? You said at the end of the 8 months they put you in some herbs. You recall the types of herbs?
She did the limogen and the microbigen. She did those, and then she did some other ones. I don't really remember what they were for. I think at one point I was taking like 90 different things in one day. I was taking a lot of stuff and I was doing a lot of different things. I was doing the castor oil packs, and just so many different things I was doing at the same time that I can barely recall. It's a blur now.
Were any of them particularly helpful that stand out in your memory that, hey, these one or several things were very helpful for me for symptom relief or for herxing or anything like that?
Um, the Epsom salt baths were the best thing ever. Like I would take like 4 really hot baths. Like I even felt my body burning, but it felt so good at the same time. But the Epsom salt bath, that really worked for me. And just going outside and walking really worked for me too.
So you didn't really have many physical pain symptoms. There's a lot
No.
of like weird other physical symptoms, but not
Mhm.
pain, right? Okay.
Right.
So at the end of this 8 month window, you go off the antibiotics, you finish the herbs, and you're on some of these other things like castor oil packs and Epsom salt baths. How do you feel? And what does your doctor tell you at this point when you're off the antibiotics?
So at that point, I'm feeling great. As a matter of fact, I think I started in September. I got off work in June, and then in September, I started my treatment. I'm so happy that it wasn't years before I found out I had Lyme. And I started the treatment in September. By December, I already felt better, like a lot better. Maybe like 40% better. In January, I felt a lot better, like 75% better. Um, and then I went back to work in May and I felt 105% better. Just felt like my brain felt like so sharp. I could remember everything. I just felt really, really good.
What year was this? Was this 21 or 22?
This is 21.
21. Okay.
Mhm.
So you're back. And now looking back, do you think that you were just sort of managing with your brain fog, not realizing how fogged you were until you got treatment? Because it sounds like you're like, wow, my brain was back. I was 105%. And I wonder if you just thought that that brain fog was normal for so many years,
Yeah.
and that was just something you just rationalized away.
Absolutely. I thought that, that was normal because I didn't know anything better. But now, I know like, hey, my brain wasn't working good, and now I know that, if I do have any symptoms like that, I need to do something about it.
So walk us through 21, summertime, right? You're back at work, you're killing it, you're 105% to the present date. Has it just been a maintenance, a maintenance routine with your doctor, and you're just rocking and rolling? Has there been any setbacks? Walk us through the last couple of years.
So, I was doing great, great, great. And then, and even in 22, I was like, man, best year ever of my life, really healthy. I could do whatever I wanted. Um, just feeling really great. And then in 2023, like around January, I started to get like depression again, like an unnormal depression, just like really depressed. I couldn't regulate my emotions. And I, of course, called Dr. Sugden. She tested me and I came back positive for Babesia. She treated that like 3 months later, it's gone. But I mean, those were the worst 3 months of my life. The babesia was like horrible. And we could not find out, like, we couldn't, she couldn't treat it for a while. Like nothing was working. And she tried so many different things and nothing was working. I was just like, oh my gosh, why was it so easy last time and this time it's so, so difficult? But finally, it went away.
What were your symptoms from Babesia, and what was the treatment that eventually worked for you?
It was um, a lot of depression, just depression. No physical symptoms. It was just a lot of depression that I could not control. And I almost feel like Dr. Sugden was just going to give up on me, like tell me just like to go somewhere else. But then it went away with everything that she gave me. We did ivermectin, we did a cocktail, we did Crypto Plus, and then it went away completely. And then we retested and it came back negative for Babesia.
So, I mean, that thankfully it sounds like a horrible 3 months, but 3 months and you rebound pretty quickly. And then what, you're back to work and you're rocking and rolling, and it sounds like you've been pretty smooth cruising ever since.
Yeah, and even when I had the Babesia, um I didn't stop working. It wasn't, I was able to manage it. Like my therapeutic skills were working at that time. I could use it. It was just really draining because I had to be using my skills. And then another thing I didn't mention is that I also did DNRS, which I felt was really helpful for me.
So DNRS, what is that? Can you describe what that is for our listeners? And many of them know, but what it is and how it works and how it helped you.
Yeah, so I hope I'm going to say this right, but the DNRS is the dynamic neural retraining system, something like that.
Yep,
Don't
you
quote
got
me
it.
on it.
No, you got it.
It's a brain retraining. So that was a program that I did while I was off work. And it took me like 6 months to do it. And it was just retraining my brain. And actually, Dr. Sugden, when I still had a few symptoms, she told me, you're not sick anymore, but your brain is still believing that you're sick. So I want you to do this program. And then sure enough, when I did all those other little lingering symptoms went away.
So it helped a lot of the what were some of those lingering symptoms that you couldn't get rid of that DNRS helped with?
I think I still had you know what I had? There was still some fear. Like I even struggled, like going back to work. Like I didn't know if I could do it. I even went one time to talk to my boss. And then after that, I felt so nervous. And then I was even off for longer just from going to work. And just like to talk to her.
And I think that makes sense because our brain pathways get stuck from our chronic illness state. And then they served us at the time, but they no longer serve us as we get better, and our brain pathways are stuck. So I think the idea behind, and I'll read, I'm just doing some research as we're talking, right? Dynamic neural retraining system is a self-directed neuroplasticity program designed to help people recover from chronic illnesses by rewiring the brain, particularly the limbic system. And, really what it does is it helps regulate maladapted stress responses often associated with chronic illnesses. And those maladapted stress responses are basically brain activities, brain pathways that become stuck because we're sick for so long and we have to unstick them, if that makes sense. That's how I think about it, right?
Yes.
So a lot of those things like stress, anxiety, those brain pathways are inflammatory. So not only are they causing these, anxious thoughts, but they're also creating inflammation, which is hindering us from fully healing. Is what I want to say. So I think neuroplasticity is a huge program, or a hugely beneficial program, and there's others out there as well. We've had My Vital Side, we've had Lindsay on, we've had Primal Trust, Dr. Kathleen King on. I mean, some great resources, really smart people, and a lot of success stories there. So there's a ton of that on our website if people want to look up more of that. So I do want to, but before we get into the really geek out stuff, what are you doing now from a maintenance standpoint? Like, so what is your day-to-day regimen like? Are you taking herbs? Are you taking supplements? Are you doing anything from a maintenance standpoint to keep yourself healthy beyond all of your mental health practices you described?
The only thing I'm doing is one, I do see Dr. Sugden twice a year for maintenance. She said I didn't have to do that. I could see her as needed, but I just want to get everything checked out. So I go and I see her, and I take supplements, just vitamins, no herbs, just some vitamins. If something's low, I will take, some vitamins. Every once in a while, she'll give me something. If I feel like my nervous system is dysregulated, she'll give me something. And sometimes I do get the like my brain doesn't feel as sharp, and she will give me something.
So, sorry,
that?
Keelan.
I'm just curious. What does she give you when your brain doesn't feel as sharp?
She gives me something called Cogni Mag, and then there's another one, and I don't know what the other one is, like right offhand.
Called Cogni Mag, is that what you said?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cogni
Like
Mag,
a
okay.
tincture, or is it a tincture or
No, they're pills.
pills?
Mm-hmm.
So, Kaylin, I really want you to jump in here because now I want to get to the fun part. So I just want to kind of summarize the fact that, you were severely impacted by chronic Lyme disease, and everybody presents differently. So the one thing I think you didn't have that I had was the physical pain component, right? The body pain component. But you had all the other symptoms. You had you had other physical symptoms besides pain. You had a lot of psychological symptoms as well. And proper treatment resulted in you becoming way better. In fact, you're 105% better. And now with this maintenance regimen, you've been able to really overcome it, get better, and fine tune everything you knew to help people from an emotional and a psychological standpoint now in your practice. So, and I just want to tell everybody again, to give you a little plug, your practice is Sacred Space Counseling, and there's going to be a link in the show notes of this podcast. But I also want to give a plug to another source, and no, we are not endorsed, and there's no money involved here, but I love perplexity.ai. It's a website I've been on to for the last 2 weeks. That's how I prepped for this podcast. In addition to reading your questionnaire, I use perplexity.ai, which is sort of like Google, but like a more AI-driven search engine that really works with you and gives you feedback and simplifies things and makes it easy to understand. So, one of the things I just pulled up here is, somatic therapy, because I wanted to learn more. So really somatic therapy, as you noted, Claudia, right? It's a body-centered approach to mental health treatment that focuses on the connection between the mind and the body, and techniques that involve somatic therapies using various mind-body techniques, which may include, and there's a whole list here, right? Body awareness exercises. So I'm going to list this, and then I'm going to ask you, Claudia, to respond and highlight the ones that stand out that you find are most beneficial, and give us some specific techniques beyond the wall pushing one that can help people. Because the idea is, hey, by doing movement techniques, body techniques, we can help alleviate the psychological distress and have more of a relief from it. So body awareness exercises, gentle physical movements, breath work, posture changes, acupressure. And then here's the one I really like, that there's no, this is just a coincidence, dance or other forms of physical expression. And I know from your question there, you love to dance as a form of stress relief. So if you could just kind of react to that and give us some of the ones you like in more detail.
I love 5 rhythms movement. So 5 rhythms movement is a type of like mindfulness type of dance. It has different flows. Usually when I go to a retreat, this is what I go after, is this 5 rhythms mindfulness movement. You have a teacher who guides you through these different flows. It could be like chaos. It could be staccato, and then you act out these different 5 types of rhythms out, and stuff moves through your body. Different traumas move through your body. Different symptoms move through your body. It's so powerful.
So really, it's a dance and movement meditation practice that helps move all of these stressors, trauma, psychological distress through our body to process them so we can feel better. Am I saying that at a simple level pretty correctly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you talked about the different rhythms, right? And the 5 rhythms are flow, staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness.
Yes.
And each of those are kind of what they are, right? Flow is characterized by a fluid circular movement. Staccato is more of a sharp focused or intentional action. Chaos being an exploratory and spontaneous movement. Lyrical is a free and expressive movement without restrictions, basically whatever we want. I feel like that's a fun one, right?
Right.
And then stillness is a centered in silence and tranquility. So each of these, I think, addresses different things, right? So what, can you help us understand, like, each of these things, maybe pick a couple of them and tell us how they can help people? You know, the lyrical one, right? Free and expressive. What is that going to help with for people that are listening?
Well, there's times when somebody has like a trauma response where they feel stuck or they freeze. So doing this type of movement will help them connect with that free flow movement and help them connect to that.
So that really is that they feel like they're stuck in the fight or flight. They're stuck in the, the freeze, right?
Yes.
If they're frozen, just that free form expression. And people that are listening in the audio only version, you were just kind of gently, like really like loosely moving your body, right? Just kind of like moving around a little bit. And that movement helps us free up that freeze component so you can take action and move, basically, right?
Right. And you have a teacher who's guiding you through that. Of course, somebody who has that freeze, response is not going to move, and the teacher is going to guide you and help you through that.
So if people want to learn more about this, is this something you teach, or is this something, how can people learn more? Is this Google 5 rhythm movement? What's the best way to look into this more?
I would Google 5 rhythms. I love the teacher, Lucia Horan, up in Big Sur. She's amazing. And she could even help you online through online practices.
So what are some other somatic techniques, Claudia, that you really enjoy and that are helpful with your clients?
Again, I'm not like a somatic experiencing therapist. I'm not trained in that, but I do have a lot of, techniques I have learned, including the 5 rhythms, because that's what I do. So I do help with, dance is something that I will do with my clients. Just any type of even like body shaking are things that I will do with my client. And again, the push in the wall is my favorite, and I just have that on my phone. I send it to my clients when they're going through something and they're needing some kind of skill or technique to do in the moment. I will just text that over to them.
So I think you just gave us a ton of free techniques people can use to try to get some relief. Now let's talk about what you are really enjoying and specializing in, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, the EMDR component. In
Yes.
fact, you are an EMDR IA approved. I guess I'm not sure what the right term. You are EMDRI approved. Before we get into EMDR and break it down, what is EMDRI?
So EMDRIA is the organization that overlooks the EMDR modality. They ensure everybody who is trained in it is, following the fidelity of the model. They make sure everybody, they approve trainers. They make sure that you are well competent in the model, which is an 8-phase model. So it's EMDRIA.
So EMDR International Association,
Yes.
professional organization dedicated to the practice and promotion of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And really what I take that is this is a group of professionals to ensure that if somebody's helping you with EMDR, if they're EMDR International Association certified or approved, you can take it to the bank that they know what they're doing when it comes to this technique.
Absolutely.
So that is you. So now let's talk about this eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is different than somatic therapies. So I'll read you the boilerplate, WebMD, I'll call it, definition. It's not WebMD, but it's a structured psychotherapy approach developed by Francine Shapiro in the late 80s to treat trauma and other distressing life experiences. And it goes into some key points about, what it is and how it works. But how does this intermingle with the chronic Lyme experience and a lot of the clients that you help that are suffering from chronic Lyme?
So it helps, first of all, with nervous system dysregulation. So EMDR has 8 phases. And one of those phases is preparing the client for trauma work. So that means that this phase is where you're going to help the client with whatever it is they need to be able to work through their trauma. The trauma can come way later. I do the trauma piece after they have already taken their medication and all that, and they're stable. But first, the second phase, which is the preparation phase, I am going to help them regulate their nervous system. And that's where I'm going to bring in my somatic, techniques that I do know, some polyvagal exercises, and any coping skills that they need.
So in the early stages, you're really helping them balance their nervous system through some somatic things. And you mentioned polyvagal exercises. So what does that mean?
So polyvagal, that's a model theory created by Stephen Porges, and that is a lot of co-regulation. And you're helping somebody regulate their nervous system. Even sometimes it's just with our voice and our presence.
So what are some polyvagal exercises that people can try at home just to see if they bring them any sort of nervous system regulation in their bedroom, right? While they're out for a walk, while they're, on a break at work? What are some things you can share with our listeners to try just to see if they give them any kind of benefit at all?
I love easy ones like humming, like, you're brushing your teeth and you're humming. You could be humming happy birthday. Doing some meditation, working out, going for a walk. And I like to give people just like 3 different exercises to do. I don't hand them a big list of things to do because they're not going to remember all that. So even if somebody just starts off with humming while they're brushing their teeth.
So you mentioned the different stages or phases, I believe you call them, of EMDR. And the early stages are basically balancing out your nervous system, helping you kind of just calm down a bit to get ready for the other phases. So can you walk us through the phases, right? So, okay, nervous system regulation. What's next?
Okay. And some of these are not going to make sense to anybody, but I'll tell you the ones that are going to make sense to people. So the first one is history taking. So a client comes in and I am going to ask them a lot of questions to see what it is that I'm going to be focusing on, what I'm going to target in EMDR. And somebody could come in and say, I have Lyme, or somebody can come in and say, I have anxiety. And then I'm going to find out all about that. When did it start? What's the worst memory they have with that? What are their recent experiences with it? At
And
this
that,
point,
oh, sorry.
I'm also going to ask, because I'm a Lyme literate therapist, I'm also going to ask, you know, have they, do they go hiking? Have they been exposed to mold? Have they ever been bit by a tick? Tell me about your parents' mental health. I want to know. Maybe their parents have, Lyme. And I'm going to find out. I am going to assess at this moment for Lyme or mold or any of the co-infections.
And that's called history taking, right? That's really you just assessing the patient to see, or the client to see what their background is, to identify how you're going to fine tune this EMDR approach for them. And then step
Yes.
two, I think, is really the preparation side. And that's where you kind of talk through the process, you deal with concerns, you put their mind at ease, and you establish this safe space and safe relationship with your client, right?
And I stabilize my client if needed.
What does that mean, stabilize? Does that mean through medication, like, or whatever it takes, right?
So well, I mean, at that time, I may, if my client's really dysregulated, I may refer them to their primary care doctor or Lyme literate doctor, or this is where I'm thinking they may have Lyme. I'm going to refer them to a Lyme literate doctor, but they may be really dysregulated. I think about myself and how dysregulated I was at that time. I'm gonna, find what they need to be calm. For myself, I did see a therapist who would calm me. And that's that co-regulation where he was, I was borrowing his nervous system this whole time I was sick so that I could feel calm and safe in my own body.
Then the assessment phase is really when you identify target memories to process
Yes.
for this, right? So what are these memories that we need to process and work through with the client?
Right.
And what are the associated negative beliefs or emotions or physical sensations you feel because of them, right?
Right, right. So where, with somebody who has Lyme, it's probably going to be the first time, that you were told you have Lyme, or that your first symptoms, or herxing. Those would be really powerful to target those. We're not doing it now. I'm gathering the information. Most people are really dysregulated at that time. We're not going to we're not going to work on those yet. First, I'm going to prepare you.
So then the next step is the desensitization, right? Or desensitization. I think I'm saying that right.
Mhm.
And really, that's where the client focuses on the traumatic memory while engaging in bilateral stimulation, which is really the guided eye movement, which hence the EMDR eye movement desensitization, right? So
Yes.
what does that really mean? So, okay, now we got to process this memory or this emotion using the guided eye movement. I think the part I'm still most confused on, and probably a lot of our listeners, is what does that mean? How does the guided eye movement help us process the traumatic memories?
Yeah, so in the phase 3, that's when the client is completely stable, that they can talk about their illness without becoming overly dysregulated. They can manage what's coming up for them, any emotions. Um, and then, yes, then we go into the reprocessing. And with the reprocessing, we're going to use our fingers. There's different, types of technology out there, different types of tight tapping that you could use for the bilateral stimulation. That's what the moving from side to side is, the bilateral stimulation. It works like REM sleep, where, when you're in REM, your body's healing, you're recovering, repairing's happening. It works the same way, but you're awake. And we are reprocessing traumatic memories that have been maladaptively stored.
And is that I think that's the installation phase, right? Which is the focus shifts to strengthening positive beliefs that the client wants to associate with that memory. So basically taking the negative emotions and the negative beliefs around that memory and replacing them with positive beliefs. So we're kind of shifting from this negative, bad thing to a positive reaction when we think about it, right?
We're not replacing it. We're just desensitizing it. So it's just desensitizing. So yeah, when I think about my illness, yeah, it was a horrible thing, but it doesn't sting. It's not stored the same way. It's just like, yeah, I had this illness and it sucks, but
But
I'm
I'm
okay. I'm
but I'm
alive.
okay. I'm safe.
Yeah.
I'm through it. It
Yeah.
wasn't that big of a deal. Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm safe and I'm okay. And then so you take it from working memory, from long-term memory, bring it into working memory. We reprocess it, and new thoughts, perspectives are established. And then you can eventually it'll go back to long-term memory, but stored adaptively.
Well, I love that. So you take it off the shelf, you
Yep.
pull it out, you re-examine it, you
Mm-hmm.
reshift how you respond to it, you put it
Mm-hmm.
back on the shelf. So when that memory is triggered again, you don't get triggered into fight or flight or those negative emotions. You get
Right.
triggered into a
Mm-hmm.
more balanced, normal response, saying, "Yep, I was sick, no big deal. Yep, I'm safe, I'm okay." Right?
You have
That's
a
the
different perspective about it.
And then what's the body scan component, that the body scan phase? Because that seems like you have to really pay attention to your physical sensations, right? While
Yeah.
you're thinking about the memory. And any lingering negative feelings or discomfort need to be processed through continued stimulation. So what do you kind of walk your clients through, like really honing into their physical response? And that kind of dictates what you need to do to continue to process those emotions, it sounds like,
Right.
right?
So I will tell them, close your eyes if it feels comfortable to you. Scan your body from head to toe. Notice if there's any sensations, any pain, anything happening in your body. What I'm checking for is to see if the trauma or any symptoms have transferred from your thinking, from your brain up here down to your body. And trauma's sneaky like that, right? You may be thinking, I'm fine, and your body's over here
Yep.
twitching, your leg hurts. If it does, we're going to continue to reprocess that until it clears and it goes away.
And then at the end of the session, or each session, I should say, you do the closure phase, which is when you help the client return to a state of equilibrium.
Mhm.
You may ask your clients to just keep a log of any thoughts around that feeling, any thoughts or feelings around that memory that arise between sessions. And then at the next session, when they come back, you do a reevaluation. Where are you at? How are you feeling? How are you reacting to those memories? And then you reassess and then repeat through this cycle again and do multiple sessions. And then that in the end helps the client become more balanced out when thinking about those emotions, which ultimately helps them better respond to trauma and really will help them heal and maintain that level of health they've achieved. Because I think this is helpful for not only people who are, in the middle of their healing journey, but also at the end of it. If they're in the maintenance phase, like yourself, Claudia, and you're feeling better and you're rocking and rolling, you're 105%, this could be helpful to maintain health without jeopardizing or risking a setback because you're doing positive lifestyle things to keep yourself healthy, right? I think this is a tool that's not only helpful at the end, but also in the middle of a treatment as well. How would you respond to that?
Absolutely. I think, as we know that, trauma that is unresolved ends up in, illness. So we want to work through those things. If things come up, you want to process them. And with EMDR, it is a lot quicker than, just talk therapy. Happens really quick, and that's what I like about it.
Define quick. So how many sessions you typically do with a client before they see relief?
I want to say that with the first session, they already see, a reduction of symptoms. However, it just depending if somebody has like complex trauma, they have a lot of stuff, because they can come in and work on their Lyme, and then, we find out that, oh, they have a lot of, early childhood trauma. It could take a year, it could take longer.
Yeah. Although it can take a year, they get relief and it's gradual relief that builds up over time. And some people respond more quickly, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So I loved going through the 8 phases, and I'm just going to repeat them because I think this is such a fascinating topic, right? So obviously, Claudia, I kind of read the academic because I'm not as smart as you. I read the academic stuff on Google, and you kind of helped me break it down and make sense of it, right? So that the 8 phases are the history taking, the preparation, the assessment, the desensitization, installation, body scan, closure, and then reevaluation at the beginning of the next session. And Caitlin actually is going through EMDR right now, so I'm going to shut up and let Caitlin jump in and geek out with you on this.
Okay, so I have a few questions for you.
Yes.
We believe in remission. I still test positive for a few bands, 41 and 66, I believe.
Mhm.
So I have like low levels of Lyme. I recently got sick with just like a throat infection. I went to a concert and my negative thoughts completely spiraled. So what techniques is this when you would use EMDR? And I know what my therapist is doing, and I can share that after. What techniques do you use for people so we don't slide back into illness and we can continue being healthy and move past? I almost have, like you describe them as OCD, like repetitive thoughts around illness. And what do you recommend for that?
So I would definitely, obviously I don't know you well enough, but if you were my client, I would check in to see how many resources you have. So I would go back to that preparation phase to, really give you some tools to be able to self-regulate in those moments when I'm not around, because I think that's really important. However, I would want to reprocess, I would want to find out what is causing this. What's the memory associated with this, and reprocess those targets with you.
Okay, great. And that seems to be what my therapist is doing, because we're reworking through EMDR and going back through my illness and what came up for me when I was sick this time and why my thoughts are going backwards. And it's been a really helpful tool for me. I've been using EMDR since I was, I believe, a junior in college, and it's really
Wow.
helped me through some of my trauma. So
Mhm.
it's amazing that this lined up where I could be here with you today.
Yeah, no, I really like EMDR. I was trained 12 years ago and I really liked it. I, had it done on myself, and it, worked really quick. I went and in one session, I was
Right.
able to resolve, what the reason I had went. So I just thought it was so powerful. And, after that, I wanted to learn more about it. So I became certified, then I became a consultant, and now I'm a trainer. So, becoming a trainer was so important to me because when I'm training other therapists, I want to talk about Lyme. I want to talk about mold. I want to talk about pandas. I want to educate all therapists about this.
My next question was going to be, how much of mental illness do you think has a root cause? Do you think a lot more patients that and therapists have no idea that their patients actually have things like Lyme and Bartonella and Babesia?
I think a large percentage of illnesses are rooted in, in infections, or are medical conditions that are overlooked. And I think it's so important that you ask those questions that could, identify if they do have, if they grew up in mold, or, did they go hiking a lot, or did their mom have Lyme, or does somebody else in their family have the same symptoms that you do? To rule those out. But we know that the ACEs questionnaire, that study talked about how people with trauma, are more likely to have medical conditions.
What is the ACEs questionnaire? I don't think I've ever heard of that.
The ACEs questionnaire is a study that was done by Kaiser. And they looked at, I can't really remember right offhand, but it's like 10 different questions that are trauma, like were you sexually abused? Were you physically abused? Did somebody in your family go to prison? Did you witness your parents, fighting? And depending on how many questions they answer, people are obviously, the more you answer, the more likely you are to have a medical condition.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And I just wanted to say I'm so glad that we have Lyme literate therapists like you that are trying to educate other therapists and teach them about root cause.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say I want to highlight Claudia because I mean we've had 400 almost 500 podcast guests on this podcast, and we've spoken to thousands of people, and we haven't done a deep dive like this on EMDR with anybody until you. And I loved learning from you, and I really believe that you are a advanced specialist who can help people with this technique and give them relief to overcome their trauma, but also to help give them peace. Because I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that while we're suffering through the illness, if we're having physical pain, I do believe that there are techniques that can help us suffer less psychologically while we're in the throes of it. And I'm not saying it can be totally gone, but we can get better relief psychologically while addressing the physical symptoms as well. And your techniques and everything you've learned, never mind from your education to your practice to your other work that you've done, to your own personal experience and fine-tuning your EMDR now with your clients, you're going to help people at whatever stage they're at get psychological relief. And also beyond that, I really believe that you're going to be able to help them avoid a relapse, because that's an important part of this journey too, because we know many people have relapses. And that is because, we have a lot of stress. We have a lot of emotional stress, physical stress. We make bad life choices. We don't sleep. We eat bad, right? Whatever it might be, unavoidable things, marital stresses, financial stresses, all those things can build up to cause relapses with chronic illness. And EMDR is a technique that will really help curb the likelihood of having a relapse. So I think at all stages of this chronic illness experience, the EMDR technique can help people. So I want to highlight that, we found you on social media, on Instagram, and your Instagram is sacred.space.counseling, and you have some really good content on there. We encourage everybody to go check you out. Your Facebook is just straight up Sacred Space Counseling. Sacred Space Counsels, it looks like. So facebook.com/Sacred Space Counsels. And your website is Claudia Arias Sacred Space. So that's ClaudiaArias SACREDSPACE.com. And I talk really fast. There's links in the podcast show notes on this podcast interview. So just whatever you're listening on, Spotify, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, look at the show notes. We'll have hyperlinks in there for everything for people to go check you out. And I really encourage people, if this resonated with you, to go check out Claudia and consider using Claudia as a practitioner to help you with EMDR, because I strongly believe in this technique, and clearly so does Caitlin, because she's been doing it and has had great success with it. So we've had you for quite a while. I just can't thank you enough, Claudia, for taking time out of your busy day to come on and share all this free, valuable stuff with our listeners. And I am so happy that you came on. I've learned a lot from you. And again, I can't thank you enough for joining our Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Caitlin. It was so nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.